Welcome to my channel. This is Bruce the Boss, and I'm about to go for ride number 2 or test number 2 and review of my new ZIPP 404 Firecrest wheel set. Reason why I'm doing this is in part, and no, I am not changing the content of what I discuss on this channel, but rather, one, as a cyclist, when looking for a new wheel set, hopefully I found very little content and or as much information on this particular wheel set, and hopefully this review will help other individuals or cyclist enthusiasts to make a better or more informed decision in terms of what wheels they get. Very few content or videos on the ZIPP 404, a lot on the 303s, but hopefully you find this useful. But also in the world of a pandemic, or pandemic, in a world filled with war or escalating tensions between NATO and the possibility of World War III with Russia, instigating with Ukraine, in a world full of inflation, food shortages. If you focus on that and do nothing but that, you'll go insane. You need to disconnect from the war that is going on every now and then. Even with all of these reports of grooming kids and sexualizing them in the public school system can drive you insane. You need to sometimes just get back in touch with nature and or just exercising. And it's not only good for you physically, but good for you mentally and spiritually. The endorphins that are released from moderate to vigorous exercise cannot be overstated in terms of the mental health benefits it provides, the relaxation to just allow you to forget about all of your troubles in the world. So there. But now the reason why I'm doing a second review is because... So you may have noticed when I was comparing my two maiden rides, the maiden ride of 2021 and my maiden ride last week for 2022, 2021, comparing my Trek Madone with the regular box set aluminum wheels I had, versus this year with my new ZIPP 404 Firecrest carbon fiber wheels. I was comparing two maiden rides that technically went to, two different courses. So I wasn't comparing apples to apples because the terrain was a good deal significantly different with what I did last week compared to my initial ride last year. Whereas last year I went up this stretch of road for about 6.5, 7 miles, turned right on this side road for just a little bit, about a mile, but you'll notice I did a quick U-turn before coming right back down to the starting point. But the reason why I had to then find an alternative route shortly thereafter is because I noticed that they were doing major construction on this stretch of road here. I used to love it because it had a great bike path along the shoulder of the road that I can stay in. Not just a shoulder, but a whole bike path on both sides of the road that I can go up and down on, and it's amazing for cyclists. But they've been doing so much construction since the latter part of 2020, and they're still not done yet to this point where there literally is no more bike path, no more shoulder. It's all closed off through the construction, literally forcing you onto the street itself, on the road, which again, I don't have any problem being on the road. That's where I'm supposed to be riding, but it's a one-lane road both sides, and the only way for cars, if there are any vehicles behind you, to get around you is, one, there can't be any opposing traffic coming the other way, in which case you have to then go over the yellow double yellow lines. I didn't want to put cars in that predicament or myself in that predicament, and or to avoid accidents. So eventually I decided to, as you can tell, venture out a little bit further. So not only do I go up this stretch of road and then, truck my way through the construction areas eventually, but then, when I did turn right on that side road, I kept going. And what makes this route a little bit more, a little bit different and or more challenging is once you get to mile 13, it's all uphill climbing from there without the reward of really descending. One of the great things about climbing is the descent thereafter to help pick up the speed. You really don't get that until mile 20, right around here. Otherwise, it's mostly all uphill climbing for the most part. A few descents, but it's still mostly climbing, making it a lot more arduous and treacherous of our route to take. And so what I would like to do is I would like to try to duplicate this initial route that I did last year, with the only exception is instead of doing 17 miles, I might actually go a couple of miles further out on this side road before making a U-turn. So instead of just doing about 8.5 miles out and then U-turning, I'll go for about 12 and a half miles before doing my U-turn to try to still get in about 23, 24 miles total, and we'll see how that goes. All right, so once again, this is my Trek Madone of the 9.0 series. And yes, I am going to be testing out my new ZIPP 404 Firecrest wheel set. Carbon fiber, 58 millimeter deep rims. It is a rim brake, and I am running the Ultegra R8000 group set, including a standard crank, which is basically a 53 tooth big ring up front, or outer ring, 39 tooth ring in the inner. Basically used for, and they're used mostly by racers in order to go as fast as possible, even though I know most bikes are coming out with the compact crank set, but I want to try to maintain my top end speed as much as possible. But here we go, get ready for ride number 2. I'll let you know how my ZIPP 404 wheel sets do on this track. All right, so taking a look at my performance and how I did, I'll look at both my Runkeeper app as well as Strava. So it does appear as though I did slightly better this time around, sticking with the original route. In fact, I might be able to do it again next week because of the construction has definitely improved on the southbound side coming back. They've now done, it's now complete. I do have somewhat of a shoulder to rely on. It's not perfect, but no longer a huge bike path, but at least it's a small shoulder that I can utilize, making a much safer return. But I did slightly better this time, 17.56 miles an hour overall, 24 miles, 122 minutes, compared to, again, just trying to get as comparative as I could to my original maiden voyage. But again, when comparing with last week, obviously you can see my speed increased quite a bit over the course of 23 miles, 121 minutes, or I'm sorry, 23.7 miles, 1 hour, 21 minutes. I was able to do an extra mile on top of that. The climb, again, because of the route, not as much climbing, although what kind of hurt me was coming back down. It was a lot, even though it wasn't as much climbing involved, I did face a lot of wind, a lot of crosswind, a lot of headwind on the way back. And so while the road back was technically from a climb perspective easier, because the other route I did last week, it was nothing practically but straight up climbing, incline for the last 30 minutes of the ride without very little reprieve at all. This one, I really only had 2 major inclines I had to worry about for a whole 10-minute stretch, or 1.5 to 2 mile stretch. And it was all flat road from that point on, with with a good deal of descent. But I was facing a mad amount of wind going against me. So that was, somewhat hard. But you'll see I did a whole lot better throughout this whole ride, but definitely in the beginning this time around, averaging at one point over 20 miles an hour during the first 11, 12 miles of this ride. As you can see, doing well over 20 miles an hour for the first 4 miles. And then at one point even hitting 27 miles an hour for an entire mile stretch during the 7-mile hit, which again would be a big increase compared to last week. And then after that, doing about 24.5 miles an hour. So maintaining a pretty high speed. If you look at my Strava segment, as you can see, I've actually hit even more personal records this time around. And that was after achieving several personal records last week. I've now added on several new personal records for that segments, for that ride, in comparison to previous hits. And power output, not too bad. And mind you, I don't have a power meter, so all of these are guesstimates by Strava based upon my weight, the size of the bike, speed, and overall terrain. Although you can definitely see my wattage definitely decreasing quite a bit, as we move forward throughout the tail end of the ride. But set a lot of personal records, again, including speeds well over 27, easily over 27.5 miles an hour, doing several stretches, but maintaining a pretty high speed. So my overall review of the ZIPP 404 Firecrest wheels is that they are amazing. And now keep in mind, this was my fourth fastest ride for that time frame. I'm maintaining really high speeds. Again, I was doing well over 20, averaging about 20 and a half miles an hour for the first half of the ride. And the only thing I think that really slowed me down was the wind coming back, keeping me from maintaining that speed because I was literally fighting the wind. Again, not really worrying about crosswinds. I wasn't really affected by that a whole lot. I could feel it, but it was not moving me to any dangerous levels and or positions. But I was affected by the fact that I was doing nothing but fighting a lot of strong winds. But what can you do? It's hill country and it's still technically early spring. We'll see how I do during the summer months when it shouldn't be quite as windy. But I love the wheels. They do allow me to hit a lot faster high-end speeds. They're great. They're working well against the wind. I wouldn't recommend it in very, very windy conditions for anyone under 175 pounds or so. If you're worried about crosswinds, but highly recommend these wheels. They are great. Just having them alone on top of I would say, the standard crankset has just allowed me to really go a lot faster and perform a lot better for the same effort and or pace, or should I say, putting forth the same power and or effort. It allows me to maintain that top end speed, even going through pretty decent inclines. As you can see, I was doing some pretty decent climbing in the beginning and before I was hitting some of the descents and still going well over 20 miles an hour for a whole straight 7 miles. Let me go back to my run keeper. So yeah, despite doing nothing, as you can see, nothing but steady climbing, straight elevation for the first about 6-7 miles, I am still, when you look at my splits, during all of those climbs, I'm still averaging over 20 miles an hour. The wheels did not slow me up in a bit. That's my review of the ZIPP 44 Firecrest wheels. Again, love the wheels, love the speed that they provide me, the performance, the stability. They're just a great overall wheel set. I was able to stop pretty well, having no issues with braking, even with rim brakes, not the disc brakes. So, I know a lot have been said about great thing about disc brakes, but you can do just as well, perform just as great with the rim brake system on the Firecrest. Not really worried too much about the overheating thus far. Doing really well. And for this right now to be the ceiling, this is only my second ride all year, or long ride all year. And this is where this is literally my starting point, I guess you can say, compared to past rides, where if I go back to April 2021 for what was my first real ride and or test, even then, or this was what, my second ride, I think? April the 26th. How did I do the ride before that? 15.6. That was my starting ride for again, pretty much the same route. 15.6 miles an hour. But again, what was it? Just about a week or so after that, I decided to add the extra length, and I did 17.07 then. Last week, I did 17.42 miles an hour. So a pretty decent gap and a difference in my overall speed, time, just with the difference of the wheels. And to know that this is my starting point now, I have a pretty decent ceiling for the rest of the cycling season. So I would definitely recommend ZIPP 404s. If you want to mix and match because you're afraid of crosswinds and depending on your size, then do the 404s in the back, 303s up front to avoid, some of the pressure from the crosswinds if that's what you're really worried about. But otherwise, keep it consistent, 404s front and back, you'll do great. So that's my review. Let me know what you think in the comment section or any thoughts. I'll continue to update. I won't do probably a weekly, not for another weekly review of these wheels. I think this is going to be enough for now just because, I don't want to oversaturate with the ZIPP 404s. I'll probably hit back towards the end of the summer, if not the MS ride itself in September. But that's all I have for now. Just let me know what you think. Any questions you have for me in the comment section. I'll do my best to respond. This is Bruce the Boss, and I'm out. Peace.